Hi guys, welcome back. We're into yet another podcast session presented to you by Sports Kabri. Arsenal and Manchester City are kicking off later tonight, but we're talking about Liverpool, who are slightly on the other side of the table and not quite in the conversation for the top four or the title race. I'm joined by Anshuman Joshi, Krishnan Iyer, Rahul Saha, and Kaustubh. Hi guys. I know, Krishnan, you're a Liverpool fan. We'll start off with you. How's the mood? How are you feeling moving into, the next game week? You're coming off of a Merseyside derby win, though.
Yes, absolutely. It was quite a refreshing result to say the least. But I take that with a pinch of salt, especially because of the way the season has been. Um, that said, I'm quite optimistic. Like Liverpool have always shown that they can step up when necessary. Especially if you remember the last game in Newcastle as well. We'll be playing Newcastle once again. So I am quite confident about the upcoming match.
Okay, guys, there's been a lot of weird buzz around Liverpool, the fact that Klopp hasn't turned it around yet, and we're still waiting for some real performances and some real dominance from a Liverpool perspective. They're shipping a load of goals at the other end. Do you guys have any particular reason for this happening? Do you guys think it's because of a certain something, Anshuman?
I don't think there is any one particular reason for this. I think there is a bunch of things. And when we last had this discussion regarding Liverpool's capitulation this season, I pointed out the fact, the psychological drain that it had taken for them to go almost all the way last season and win the quadruple. And that would have been one of the greatest achievement ever, if not the greatest. And from them to enter into the season with all the things as they were. And one of the biggest issues that Liverpool have right now is that the kind of spending that they are having is not sustainable. Especially when you think about the likes of Newcastle now and Man City. So that spending aspect is something that we need to come up discuss once again. And I think perspective plays a very big role when Liverpool's situation is concerned, because the one thing that we need to keep in mind about the Premier League is that there are a lot of global brands here, at least six big global brands, and there are only four places for the Champions League. And qualifying for the Champions League is the bare minimum of what is considered to be a success. And if it's not happening, then everything's a disaster. So, at any given moment in time for every season, there is such a sense of jeopardy in the Premier League that at least two teams will always be in disaster mode. And you compare this to the likes of Barca and Atleti in La Liga, who have had their financial issues over the last, well documented financial issues over the last seasons. They, for Atleti, even the football that they are playing has been slightly troublesome. But still, at the end of the day, no matter what happens, they end up in the top four places. So that aspect of this disaster is reduced quite a bit. And you see this in Bundesliga as well, with Leipzig and Dortmund and Bayern. They may not do the best in Champions League, but they will be there in the top four in the Bundesliga. So that's not much of an issue. So from a global perspective, I think this idea that how we are defining success for these teams that are considered to be European heavyweights, it plays a huge role. Because if this whole Liverpool situation, if we take it away from the Premier League and put it into any other league, let's say Liga or even Bundesliga, I don't think we will have this much of a panic about Liverpool, because Liverpool in any other league would not have a problem in getting into the top four. But this is the Premier League we're talking about, and then the global brand aspect of it all. And then you have to keep in mind that at any given moment, there will at least be two teams who won't need to get into the Champions League for even their financial investment to make sense, for it to become sustainable even for a short term. And if that's not the case, then it's a disaster. So I think putting it into the Premier League context is one of the biggest reasons why Liverpool's situation is being considered a panic. It's a bit of a lesson for the rest of the teams as well, because it needs to be kept in mind that financial sustainability, as far as your investment is concerned, is something that all clubs, especially the ones aspiring for Champions League football, need to keep in mind. Because the moment you start investing in your football club, hoping or needing some kind of outcome to occur, and in this case a lot of teams invest in invest in the players, invest in the backroom staff, keeping in mind that okay, we have to qualify for Champions League for this to happen. You are immediately setting yourself for disaster somewhere down the road, because success is never a guarantee. It doesn't matter. You can drive the probability toward in your favor by having a sports washing project backing you, because then money does not stops being an issue for you. But apart from that, the financial sustainability for the rest of the clubs, especially in Liverpool's case, and we'll come back to their FSG ownership in a while, that you are predicated on what you are getting in return on your investment, on your revenue, in order to make sure what you're putting back into the club. So for financial sustainability is a very important lesson that Liverpool's whole story under Klopp sends out for the rest of the Premier League, especially for the ones who are and have the kind of ownership that Liverpool do. So that is one of the important lessons. And another takeaway that I would say is that we need to make sure that we stop looking at Champions League qualification as something that is like the be all and end all of everything. Again, this is something that is more important for the owners to keep in mind. And yeah, we'll keep continue discussions as we go along. But yeah, there's a lot to unpack here.
Anshuman mentioned that Liverpool are having a disastrous season. Not only are they out of the contention for the top four, but they could be struggling to get a spot in the European places as well, Kaustubh. How much of this is down to recruitment? And they brought in Cody Hakpo in January. Did they need more, and where did they need more, if the answer is yes?
I think managers always make mistakes across. If you look at any manager and their long-term stay at a club, or their long-term stint at the club, but I think all of it comes down to how much support they've been handed by their owners. I mean, the club's owners, the directors, the sporting directors. If you look at even Man United and that historic era under Sir Alex Ferguson, I mean, Sir Alex Ferguson essentially overperformed considering the resources United had at hand. It was based on managing the resources United had often. I mean, they lost Cristiano Ronaldo, could never really replace him in the best way possible. I mean, these things happen. And I think Liverpool were always overperforming. I mean, I think the same can be said for Pochettino's Tottenham side as well. Because if you look at the amount they were spending as compared to what they were earning, it was pretty much the same or slightly less. So, I mean, you look at a golden example can be Spurs themselves. Like, there were times when they were spending absolute peanuts, but somehow Mauricio Pochettino took them to Champions League final. And as a coincidence, that was the same season when Spurs didn't sign a single player in that summer. I mean, they went after Jack Grealish but couldn't really sign it because they missed out on what, £4-5 million or something. So I think Liverpool have always been overperforming, and that's obviously down to Klopp, Jürgen Klopp himself. And now that things are sort of falling apart, where, as Anshuman mentioned, that owners care about sustainability for way more than we actually care to think about it. But once things are going out of hand, Klopp can't overperform as much as he had in the last few years. Because if you look at what Man City have done, it was, I mean, if you look at their underlying stats ever since this golden era of theirs has come about, XG wise, they've always been at the top. I mean, in terms of goal scoring, in terms of not conceding goals. Whereas Liverpool, even if they finish second, it's almost like they've overperformed, even stats wise. And even apart from the fact that even when it comes to the number of resources they have as compared to the other teams and how much they spend, they've always been overperforming. And I think it's becoming complicated now because there's like issues around the ownership and how much they're spending, and then the fact that they've not been able to sell players either for the amount that they've sold players in the past. I mean, I still think that selling Mohamed Salah back in the summer would have been a fine choice, because I think the sort of recruitment that Liverpool have and the players out there in the market, I mean, at this point, they could have signed a player of, if not of his ability, then at least of his profile, which could have led to returns in the longer term, which is why I think signing someone like Cody Gakpo doesn't really make sense for me. I mean, especially the fact that I think he's playing out of position. And secondly, I think it essentially ignored their problems in midfield, which were pretty obvious. But I mean, I think it was similar to last summer when Tottenham were about to sign Luis Diaz. I mean, there was talk about the fact that they were about to sign Luis Diaz, but as soon as Liverpool realized that a top target of theirs is about to be poached by a top four rival, um, they thought, why not just do it right away in January? So I think that's what happened this time around as well, when United were constantly linked with Eddie Akpo. And even though he wasn't really the perfect fit for United, I still think he would have added to that United front line in some way or the other. But I think Liverpool sensed that opportunity and once again did the same thing which they did last January. So I think it's now probably time to sort of retune Liverpool's expectations, because we talk about these cycles in football, and we compare a certain uh, point in a manager's stint to the current time, which I think lacks a lot of context. So I think, correct, considering the current context and the fact that Liverpool have these ownership issues, the essentially a depleted squad and obvious midfield issues. For the time being, I think readjusting their expectations, at least for till the next season, would make a lot of sense.
Rahul, then are we moving towards a conversation where we're saying it's probably not Klopp's fault? It's probably because the recruitment has not been good enough. We haven't sold players at the right times, like Kaustubh mentioned, and we haven't brought in the players to replace guys who left. Guys like Sadio Mane were probably irreplaceable, or is Luis Diaz a good enough replacement to take his place?
Well, yeah, if we are talking about Luis Diaz, the player individually, yes, Luis Diaz is good enough if given the time to, to at least make a similar sort of impact that Sadio Mane has made over time. However, I feel if we go back a little and touch upon the recruitment part here, what I would like to talk, like a point here is that if you look at Liverpool's recruitment post their Champions League winning run, what we will see is that most of the players that they have signed have had a long list of injuries with their previous clubs. Take, for example, an Ibrahim Konate or a Thiago Alcantara, for example. So these players have had a long list of injuries when Liverpool were scouting them. So and if you look at Liverpool as a whole, like again, I will take the example of the Champions League winning season. So from that 18-19 season onwards, Liverpool had around somewhat around 170 to 180 injuries. So, and out of those 170 to 180 injuries, 66 injuries have been muscular soft tissue injuries. Now, so this makes more than one third of the injuries, and so the first so the first point should be so the finger should be first pointed at the fitness, the backroom staff that are involved in the with the fitness and with the fitness regime, as well as the recovery and rehabilitation programs. Whereas while uh, in the recruitment front, why they haven't been able to recoup the same amount of money that they have been able to do in the past, because like they are not buying players who are good enough assets at the present moment. Because like since like let's take for example Cody Hakpo and Darwin Nunes. Now, like if you take different reports published by Athletic or even Melissa Reddy's recent report from Sky, where like she has addressed that both these deals were primarily influenced by the coaching staff and not the the sports scientist team and the recruitment team, which has been the case in the for the past 5 to 6 seasons. So like this uh, so this disconnection between the recruitment team and the coaching staff has also played a big role in how how the team has become way too top heavy, and there is evident lack of depth in the fullback and the midfield slots.
Um, Krishnan, then, like Rahul mentioned, there needs to be harmony amongst the coaching staff and the backroom staff. And based on factors considered by all parties, you decide on who to buy, and based on their injury record, you probably go for those players. Are you at all surprised by the number of injuries Liverpool have had? Or are we saying, you know what, this is an unlucky season, we've had so many injuries, and that's probably why we're not at the position we should be?
I would say the latter. And the reason is not. This answer is going to be a bit long. All right. So first of all, I don't know how many know the reason for David De Gea's decline. I mean, he was a top goalkeeper under Alex Ferguson. What happened then? After under Moyes, then Van Gaal, the decline continued. The main reason for that is that there was no goalkeeping coach for Man United, a dedicated goalkeeping coach. So that is a similar case here now, especially after Mike Edwards' departure. Sorry, then Julian Ward took over. This recruitment system that we had in place was completely done with. So a new system had to be brought in place. That was missing. Then I don't know if how many know that Liverpool have recently, not recently, in November they appointed a new doctor, which means the club did not have a doctor to take care of all these issues. So that's where the issue is. And plus, the team came on the back of a 63-64 game season, right? Which is probably unprecedented in Premier League history. So coming on the back of a heavy workload season, you need that downtime. You need to build your systems up and run. You need to build your system back from base. The base itself was gone. There's no recruitment policy possible because new people are coming in place. There's no doctor to take care of all the new recruits and treat old injuries. Not saying that there's absolutely no doctor, but then the level of expertise that is required. I mean, you need a manager at the end of the day. Without Jürgen Klopp, say without Sir Alex Ferguson, right? Would anybody else who would have been there in 2013 would have won the Premier League with that team? Absolutely not. So every team, every manager needs a system in place, and that system itself is gone. So obviously, that is exactly the reason why the whole underperformance is happening right now. The injuries, of course, it's also unlucky, right? I mean, in case of Luis Diaz, it was that tackle which really did not do well for him. So, if you remember Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain as well, he had a fantastic match up until he performed that tackle against Man City when he injured his knee. So that's the reason. It's just plain unlucky. Plus certain factors which compounded to it, like the absence of a doctor, a team doctor.
Anshuman, the heavy season that Krishnan mentioned last time out, isn't it more the reason for the ownership to come out and back the manager and give him the resources that he needs to go out and buy some players, because he knows that his players have been through quite the toil last time out, and he needs resources not only from a point of view to buy players, but also to have the right guys behind the scenes to ensure that the club is doing the most it can.
So when we look at player recruitment, we need to keep in mind one thing, that you don't always need to spend big in a transfer market, which is something we as fans always forget. Because I'll once again talk about the 2021 season, in which Liverpool were coming off the back of their incredible Premier League campaign, and teams around were buying players left and center. But Liverpool fans were slightly agitated that they were not buying anyone, and Costas Tsimikas for a long time was the only acquisition they had. And then they went out and buy Thiago Alcantara. Now, the point is that in that moment in time, they didn't really need that many players. And player recruitment also needs to be taken. One thing that also needs to be taken care in mind is the fact that you don't want to disharmonize the squad that already exists. Now, the idea of bringing Darwin Nunez is something that, for me at least, became very apparent back in April when he scored a bunch of goals for Benfica against them, and almost brought Benfica back into a tie that, quite frankly, they shouldn't have had any foot in. And if Liverpool would have had their way, and this is something that I talked about last time as well, if they had a choice in the matter, I think they would have rather sold Mo Salah instead of the Sadio Mane. But it was more the case that Bayern came for him, and Sadio Mane was like, okay, I want to go, I want a new challenge, and Liverpool were kind enough to acquiesce to his demands. So that is the thing that we need to keep in mind about player recruitment as well. I think the ownership would come back and say, look, we have backed you to the best of our capabilities. And if you are a fan of the club, you can say, okay, it's not enough. The ownership can come back and say, look, you are coming from a point of view of looking the likes of City and Newcastle. And once again, we have to reiterate that we just do not have that kind of money. And an interesting thing that the FSG always gets away with is the Neymar transfer that happened to PSG is such a watershed moment in time that if it hadn't happened, a lot of the things that we're seeing right now could quite simply not exist. And why I bring that moment from 2017 is because that accelerated Barca towards going for Coutinho in the January of 2018, and the money that Liverpool got from it was the amount that they were able to then go out and spend in Virgil van Dijk and Alisson Becker, two players who fundamentally have been the biggest reasons for why Liverpool have been able to go on and then succeed the way they have. Because before then, the recruitment that Liverpool have had was being made fun of, if to put it simply like that. So that is something that needs to be kept in mind as well, that there are outside factors that have dictated that Liverpool's acquisition have been able to come bear fruits for the teams. And the fact that they haven't been able to recuperate most of the money that they put in the market, when you look at the likes of Takumi Namino and even Naby Keita at this moment, who's set to leave for free in the summer, and they committed quite a lot of money to him when they acquired him from Leipzig. So all of these things need to be kept in mind. FSG, obviously, from an ownership point of view, would come back and say, look, we have given you Luis Diaz in last January. We have given you Cody Hagbo in this January. So we are backing you. Now, where that backing is coming from, whether that those are the kind of players that Liverpool require, is a separate discussion. But from an ownership's point of view, they can come back and say, look, as much as we can back you, we have backed you. And in all of this, we need to keep in mind the fact that FSG are also looking to invite new owners on the board, and reliable reports are also suggesting that they are just as ready to just sell the whole thing altogether, and which again makes sense from a FSG point of view, the same way Glazers wanting to sell Manchester United makes sense, because after the fact that the Super League was so vehemently opposed, and just putting aside the fact that whatever is being proposed right now, the one of the major issues for all the venture capitalists that had acquired but the Premier League clubs. You look at the Glazers at United, you look at the Cronkies at Arsenal, the ENIC club at Spurs, and the FSG group at Liverpool. All of these were looking for a way to guarantee more revenue coming into the club. So the project Big Picture that was suggested a couple years back, that was about this as well, so that they could hold more power, they could guarantee more revenue for themselves. The Super League, in its initial form, obviously was about guaranteed returns in a closed shop model. So for these people to then come out and realize, okay, we cannot really guarantee our revenue in this way. So when you cannot guarantee our revenue, we cannot really guarantee the investment that is going back into a club. So, and if we cannot do that, why exactly are we existing? So that's just one point that I think these ownerships are keeping in mind, and which is why they are slowly relenting towards liquidating these assets and selling them to someone else. So the fact that we know that FSG have been looking to sell at least part of the club is also something that needs to be kept in mind when we talk about acquisition, because you don't want to put money into a club that you are looking to sell completely, right? So there are two aspects to this. FSG could come back and say, look, we have backed you in ways we could, and also we are looking for potential investors, so it makes sense for us to not go gung-ho, and it makes sense for you to not expect the kind of signings and the kind of investment the likes of Newcastle and City are making.
So, Kaustubh, if that is the case, and if FSG are not going to go gun ho and splash the cash, we need to work with what we have, right? Do you think the players that Liverpool have are played in the right positions? For example, do you think Nunes is a wide player, or should he be played in the number 9 role? Is Hakpo a wide player, or should he be played in the number 9 role? Are there other players that should be brought in instead of these wide players at the moment?
Yeah, I think one of the fundamental problems that a lot of people don't really go over when it comes to Liverpool is the fact that there's a disconnect when it comes to the sort of players they sign across windows. Because if you look at the sort of player Thiago is and his background, I mean, Thiago is one of my favorite players in Europe at this point. I mean, has been for a while now. And he's someone who was 29 when they signed him, thrived in possession-based systems because he's a Barcelona youth graduate, played in their academy, grew up under Pep Guardiola and stuff. So the idea about signing Thiago is to go into a phase where you want to become a team which is more possession oriented than you were. I mean, Liverpool obviously were the sort of team would like to play between the lines, but they were never the sort of team you would correlate to dominating possession. But once you sign Thiago, that's the sort of revolution you're going towards. But last summer, they ended up signing Darwin Nunez, who, for many, I mean, when he was signed and even before he was signed, there were questions from a lot of these prominent analysts across Twitter and otherwise that Darwin Nunez was not going to fire in a possession-based system, or if he was ever going to fire in a possession-based system, it's going to take some time for him to gel in. I mean, he's someone who's played in that counter-attacking system where he's got space to run in behind, which we saw in the Everton game recently, where Nunez was really good for that. The Salah goal, I think, the first goal. So I think that's also a disconnect with which Klopp has had to deal with, where a lot of players are a mismatch for their teammates. And that comes from the fact that Liverpool either saw these opportunities in the market and signed them without actually taking into account what the needs of the squad were. I mean, a lot of that's an issue with a lot of clubs across the Premier League and across Europe. But I think the best thing that I really appreciate about Jurgen Klopp is the very fact that he's someone who's very much into looking at the resources that he has. He's very much into looking inwards. I mean, it's really rare to come across a Jurgen Klopp press conference where he talks about what player he wants to sign, which is not quite where modern day football culture, the way football media works, is going. If someone asks Klopp about transfers and stuff, he usually, tries to nudge those questions away, or essentially gives these answers where he essentially says, I have a squad at my hand and I'll look inwards to solve all the problems that we have, which is what I think he tried to do in the summer, where he ended up coming out in a press conference saying that it's all his fault. And he was one of the people who advocated for Liverpool to sort of use these internal options, which he clearly has with Basetic. But I think there's also an issue about, I mean, this is one of the issues that I've always got with managers of the Jurgen Klopp ilk. I mean, even with someone like Maurizio Sarri and sometimes even Pep Guardiola, although it's a different case that Guardiola has moved on to a phase in his career where he's really flexible with shapes and systems. But I think what sort of makes me criticize Jurgen Klopp a little bit is if you look at someone like Mikel Arteta, what he did with Arsenal in his very first season. I think Arsenal finished 7th or 8th in the Premier League when he first came in, but Arsenal won the FA Cup. And that was through a plan B, which worked out at least in the short term. And Arsenal sort of used that similar system in the Premier League as well to get some results. And that's what Erik ten Hag has done at Man United as well, which tells me that these are the sort of managers who are much more suited to the next step of football. Whereas, I mean, Klopp is someone who's really, whenever he moves to a club, whenever he joins a club, he's really invested not just in the project, he's 100% committed to the good of the fans, that the playing style that he's going to develop. So I think that probably comes from how committed he is towards what he's doing. But there was a phase this season where Klopp used a 4-4-2 system, 4-4-2 formation, and there's a difference between formation and system, where I think Harvey Elliott was playing on the right, and essentially, even though it was a 4-4-2 system, Harvey Elliott was essentially playing as a right winger in a 4-3-3 shape. So it was a change in formation, but the system was largely the same. So, and I think it's like we've seen managers like Mikel Arteta, when he never had his own players, even though he wanted to impose his own system onto the team, he made sure that they went 3-5-2 in the FA Cup and in the Premier League. Klopp tried that, and as soon as the World Cup came in, that plan went out the window. And I think apart from that Arsenal game, Liverpool were pretty decent in that spell where they used a 4-4-2. I'll say the 4-4-2 formation, not the system. As I said, there's like differences between a formation and a system. But I think it's the current Liverpool squad. There's massive issues in there. Fabinho isn't up to it, which he hasn't been for a while, and I think there's a lot of clubs across Europe who are way too keen about overusing their defensive midfielders, and Liverpool did quite the same. I mean, Real Madrid, when they had Casemiro, they played Casemiro pretty much thrice a week sometimes, because their backup defensive midfielder wasn't, I mean, let's say he wasn't Casemiro. Inter did that with Marcelo Brozovic, and he can't even play a single game a week. And Liverpool did the same thing with Fabinho, well before that spell where I think 2021 season where Liverpool almost were out of the top four, but they, I think, finished third or something. I think Liverpool did the same thing with Fabinho as well. I think since the issue, I think the most pertinent issue in Liverpool's case is the fact that there's limited pressing from the front, which is Klopp's favored aspect about how the game's played. And secondly, which is connected to the idea of pressing, is the fact that there's no cover in midfield a lot of times, and they end up getting overrun. I think both the issues are connected. If you're pressing well, um, there's a higher chance that your midfield doesn't get overrun. And I think that's where Liverpool missed Roberto Firmino a fair bit. I mean, he's been in and out of the team for about a couple of seasons. Um, he was someone who's, I mean, almost what Klopp wanted out of Adam Lallana when Lallana was at the club. He was a really good presser and never really allowed. I mean, he had these moves where uh, even when he's not pressing, he had these, I mean, almost like wrestling moves, the wrestling moves the wrestlers have. He had this move where he never allowed the opposition to step out, even when he wasn't pressing. And they obviously met Gini Wijnaldum as well, and Divock Origi as well. I think it's the current squad. I don't think it's good enough to finish inside the top four. I mean, I don't think they're even good enough to beat Newcastle at this point, because Newcastle United are probably the most well organized team in the Premier League after Arsenal. And considering the fact that they barely concede goals, I think Newcastle are top three for the least number of goals conceded across the top five European leagues at this point. Whereas Liverpool, we know Liverpool are not the most defensively proficient team around, especially this season. So I think a lot of it depends on how Roberto Firmino plays, uh, and a lot of it depends on how Fabinho ends up playing or whether he's fit or not. Because I think the issue with Thiago a lot of times is that he was 29 when Liverpool signed him, and he already had these injury issues, and he's stepping into a much more demanding system under Jurgen Klopp, and people sort of expected him to play pretty much every game, which he can't do considering the injury record that he previously had. So I think Thiago is not going to play every game, but I think the key parts of the whole mechanism in going into the second half season will probably be Fabinho and Firmino when it comes to purely defending out of possession.
So Rahul, Kaustubh mentioned that there is an issue of an aging midfield. Thiago is not going to play every game. Um, are you going to say let's turn to the youngsters in Bajcetic and Elliott to basically handle that midfield, or do you need to go and dip into the market? And should you have brought in a midfielder instead of somebody like Harpo?
Look, if look, first of all, there is no other way than revamping this midfield. And if you are to revamp this midfield, you have to at least spend around 180 to 200 million in the next couple of transfer windows to revamp this midfield. Now, I would also like to go back to Kaustubh's point where he said that there's a certain disjoint and misidentity between certain set of players within the squad. No, I mean, especially regarding Thiago Alcantara. What I would like to say is that the identity and the philosophy has always been the same with Klopp now, and Thiago Alcantara was never this way of going out of his gegenpressing way and bringing a tactical evolution to it. Thiago Alcantara, in my opinion, was just the icing on the cake, where his primary role was to break down the lowest of lowest blocks and provide those clear cut opportunities for the front line, which although like Liverpool with their sustained pressing, were able to retain 60 to 65 of the possession. They were not able to create those clear cut chances that they started doing after Thiago Alcantara came to like join them. However, like as we know, like he's someone like who is susceptible with injuries and hasn't, and funny enough, like in the last 7 seasons, he hasn't had a single season where he has played more than 70% of the game time. So that says a lot about him. And coming back to the drop in performance of the players, so like what I feel is that like it is more of a burnout collectively from the players than than there being something fundamentally wrong with Klopp's system. Like I did some research with the number of players and the number of injuries that Liverpool have had over the last 4 to 5 seasons. Now, if you look at the top three outfield players for Liverpool over the last 4 seasons, we have Mohamed Salah, Andrew Robertson, Trent Alexander-Arnold, Virgil van Dijk, Roberto Firmino, Fabinho, Henderson, James Milner. So these players have played the most minutes for them in each of the last 3 to 4 seasons. And now, if you look at the most number of injured players for Liverpool, if you look at the top 10 players in these 4 to 5 years, then the top 6 or 7 players will be the first change substitutes that you have for this front for the starting position. So in my opinion, like if something is going wrong, it is going wrong on the training pitch, which is impacting the team's performance here. And moreover, while the front so while the first team is getting repeatedly played and as has led to them getting burned out this season, the players that are warming the bench haven't had that amount of exposure on the field, which has led to them continuously breaking down whenever they have been called upon to do the job. Because as I've said that if you look at the top 10 injured players in the last 4 years, 7 out of the top 10 players are from the substitute bench. So that says a lot. And for this season, I think more than these factors and also Klopp's tactics, I feel the turnaround between the seasons has played a big factor in Liverpool not getting up to steam and still not firing on all cylinders, and the players not being able to perform to their fullest. Because you see, from last season to this season, the off season was only 36 days, which is very small for a team like Liverpool, who played every single fixture that was possible for them last season. And if you also take the last 2 seasons as well, like if in the 2021 season they played 56 games, during the sorry in the 1920 season they played 56 games. In the 2021 season they played 53 games, and last season they played 63 games. And of these, around 170 odd games, their starting 11 has been more or less the same in around 80% of the games. So like this burnout was expected. Like it was expected that this burnout was going to come for Liverpool, but it was a matter of like when. And like as the backup of, like if we're talking about the midfield options, like yeah, like Fabinho is not performing, but he's the only specialized DM that Liverpool have at the moment. Like Stefan Bacetic is there, but he's still raw. He's 18 years old, and I don't still believe that he has the physicality and the the awareness and the intelligence to keep on performing for a side of Liverpool's caliber throughout the season. Because as we know with youngsters, like there will be inconsistency. Like one game he will give you a 8 out of 10 performance, and then the next weekend there will be a 4 out of 10 performance. And then again, uh, for the for the two free eights, again the drop off from the likes of Thiago to a Harvey Elliott, or let's say a Fabio Carvalho, is, for my opinion, too is way too bigger to to not make an impact on the playing style, or the or impact the results over the course of the season. And this is not just in terms of quality; it is also in terms of physicality as well. So like this that that will be my opinion on this. So like if they are to fix their issues, like it has to be first, like something has gone with their motivation, or like something like that. So like they have to fix their mentally a mental aspect of it, and after that, like they have to get everyone on the pitch and fix it. I don't think like solutions from outside, outside signing can do that big of a difference. Because let's not forget, this team, almost won the quadruple last season. So like in a span of 6 to 7 months, it can't go that bad that this team cannot recover again next season, if given the proper time to recover, and if they could get their mojo back.
I think fair point, Rahul. I'm just going to come back to Krishnan for our final say here. Rahul did mention that the burnout was expected. You've played so many games over a certain period of time, and your midfielders aren't getting any younger. Um, is it the right time, according to you, to bring in a midfielder or two just to help your A-listers recover, like help your Thiagos recover, help your Hendersons recover, and give somebody else an opportunity who is not that big of a drop off, like Rahul mentioned? What are you also looking forward to, Krishnan, for your club in the coming months and in the summer?
Okay. So adding to a few points that Kaustubh and Rahul added, right? The burnout is expected. I mean, it's Liverpool have been on 3 seasons on full throttle, right? And it's just not easy. I don't know a team that has been on full throttle uh, for 3 or 4 seasons and done that, and then have this entire base gone away, and then starting afresh. So that's it. Look, I sort of disagree with Kaustubh when he says that Liverpool will not finish top four. I agree when he says that, but I also disagree when he affirms that like they will not finish. I'm sure Liverpool will give a fight. Like we are 9 points off Newcastle, I think, with a game in hand, if I'm not fourth place Newcastle. So I'm sure it will go down to a fight. But even with Dortmund, right? With whatever team they had, Klopp managed to finish seventh in the Europa League places. So they will definitely give it a fight, and it'll go down to the last game. Then, as far as the expectations, I feel that Klopp is evolving, right? And this is the right time to evolve. He couldn't do that as soon as he came. We were in the Europa League final. He figured that okay, he's not going to be able to continue with the 4-2-3-1. Right? Once we lost the Europa League final, he brought in players, changed the entire system. Not just the players, not the formation. He changed the entire system that he was playing with. So I think that's exactly what is happening right now as well. The system's going to change. His philosophy is going to change. Even he feels, from what I can understand, he feels that he needs to evolve, he needs to change, and that's exactly what he's already set in process. And that is going to take time. It is not going to be easy. It is going to be one of the most difficult periods, and that's exactly what we are in right now. The kind of profile players that we've had, like Luis Diaz, Koi Gakpo, those are the players that we actually get regularly. Thiago, those are the players that we actually think of signing. But given that they have done that, it signals that Klopp is changing, Klopp is evolving. So I think Liverpool 3.0 is what I'm expecting under Klopp right now. Yes, top four, they will go all the way. And next season, I believe that it will be a very, very refreshed Liverpool squad. And especially with the fact that they will be making some additions off the field as well. Like the doctor has already confirmed. The doctor obviously cannot come in before the start of next season. I mean, he'll come in just before the start of next season. So yes, all these changes, I believe, off the field will happen. And that's exactly where we are looking.
So the Liverpool fan Krishnan wants to stay optimistic. He believes that Liverpool will go all the way and they'll fight until the last game for the top four. We'll see. We'll be back once that's settled.
And Rahul, you know what? Let's not forget, they are still in the Champions League, and Liverpool have always been the team. 2005 case in point, still fresh in our memories. Like we were down and out in all competitions, but Champions League was still there. Like just like how we laud Sir Alex Ferguson to like say okay, nobody else could have done it with that team. Nobody else could have done it with that team except Rafa Benitez at that point of time. So I still believe that we are still in the Champions League. I know it's Real Madrid, not the easiest opposition, but still there's a chance. What's to say, okay, we can't win it? Like who would have thought Liverpool would have been in 4 competitions? So maybe with 1 or 2 signings, Liverpool could have even done the quadruple last season. But well, we won 2 domestic titles. How many teams can say, okay, we won 2 trophies last season? I don't know. So that's something to be happy about. The biggest perception right now, the biggest thing is that we are fighting a perception battle, right? Liverpool won 2 trophies, but the thing is that Liverpool haven't won anything. That's how it feels. Everyone feels that we are down in the dumps. It feels like we are Everton. We are in the relegation zone. It's not the case. We are still in a good position. We are not in a great position. We are in a good position. So that's something to take away.
Krishnan, I'm with you. I have two Liverpool players in my fantasy team. I really hope Liverpool do well. I mean, it's been bad with Nunes and Robertson in there, but I really hope that they do end up performing well enough. And Klopp does make the most of the side he has right now. But yeah, thanks guys for joining in. Let's review the status and see where we're at after the season is complete, or probably sometime before that as well. Thank you guys. Thank you guys for joining in.
Bye.
Thank you, Rahul.